Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel TV, and I'm joined with Jeff Berkowitz once again. Jeff with Public Affairs, and we bring Jeff in frequently, as you know, because he is more the expert on what is going on in Chicago. And Jeff, you and I talked about the Illinois primary results last time we did our show. One of the key races in Cook County took forever to find out who won the nomination to be the state's attorney. What can you tell us about that? Because now I understand it has been finally decided.
Right. And the winner is Eileen O'Neill Burke. She is the winner in the Democratic primary for state's attorney of Cook County. It took 10 days, Terry. The election was March 19th. AP called it 10 days later, March 29th. And she won by about 1,500 votes. And we don't know what we got. And we have to remember, although the Democratic primary is often and is almost always these days in Cook County, the general election, there still is the general election left. She was just she was just named the Democratic nominee, Democratic Party nominee. But the election is November 5. She faces Bob Fioretti, the Republican nominee. He did not have any competition in the Republican primary. So what did we get? What did we get? Is Eileen O'Neill Burke the law and order candidate? I thought so. She was facing Clayton Harris, who clearly was not. He was Tony Preckwinkle's candidate. He was, people said, he was Kim Foxx 2.0. Kim Foxx, for people who don't know from other parts of outside of Cook County, Kim Foxx was the rogue prosecutor put in there by Tony Preckwinkle and Soros in 2016. We've seen this huge increase in crime, especially in the last 4 or 5 years of her 7-year tenure so far. That's Kim Foxx's tenure. So this race we thought was law and order candidate Eileen O'Neill Burke against Kim Foxx 2.0. That was Clayton Harris.
Let me
What
let me
happens when
insert something for a minute so the people know, because they don't, downstate we don't know these candidates. But
right,
obviously, Tony Preckwinkle is African American. Kim Foxx is African American, and the point that some people made is that they were soft on crime because they didn't like the number of African Americans being incarcerated. Well, Eileen Burke is not African American. There she is. This is a clip from one of the debates they had, which you attended. We'll hear more about that in just a bit. But you told me off camera that Eileen Burke seemed to be, and you just said it here, more of the two, more the law and order candidate. And I think that's about what you're going to go into. But I wanted to bring up the racial thing. And to what
right.
extent also is race an issue in this race or not?
Well, it's you have two white people running against each other. Bob Fioretti is white. Eileen O'Neill Burke is white. So in the general election, you would think race should not be a part of it. But race is something people manage to sneak in there a lot, as you know, in the country, in the state, in Cook County. And the important thing, the after the election, the big headline, that is, I should say, after she's declared the winner, after she has her little victory party, lo and behold, speaking to a union, she loves unions, Eileen O'Neill Burke does. She's speaking to one of the major unions, and she says, I am not the law and order candidate. Okay. And she says, no, I am here we're going to turn these people around, the criminals. Okay. Turn them around, Terry. We didn't hear that before. What is
Aren't
this? She's running to the
prosecutors
center?
supposed to be the law and order? That isn't that the definition of law and order? The prosecuting attorney for a county. If
Absolutely.
she's not going to be the law and order individual, then who the heck is? I would guess Bob Fioretti is going to make
Yeah.
that an issue, that he is the one that's
Right.
going to be incarcerating
Well, Bob
criminals.
Ferretti was advised by Joe Morris, Mr. Thoughtful for 4 or 5 decades, Mr. Conservative in Chicago and Cook County. Joe Morris says this is a great gift to Bob Fioretti. Bob, he did said this publicly. You are the law and order candidate. She's not. Run on that. Nobody in Chicago wants more crime. They want less crime. black or white, that's what they want. Nobody in Cook County,
Bob
wants more
Fioretti
crime. They
is a
want less crime.
Bob
So
Fioretti, as I
that's the
understand, is a
gift.
former Democrat. Everyone, it seems, in Cook County, not literally, but obviously we know that Democrats have controlled Cook County and Chicago for what, 80, 90 years? The Republican Party has been non existent for all practical purposes. Does Bob
Hold
Fioretti,
on.
running as a Republican, have a chance to be elected?
Well, hold on. Before I answer that, just let me point out factually, and we haven't had a mayor in Chicago in 80 or 90 years. At least Mayor Daley, the real Mayor Daley, Richard J. Daley, was elected in Chicago 1955. So that's 70 years or so right there. So, but for Cook County, we last had a state's attorney from the Republican Party elected in a special election of 1990, I think it was. Okay. In any case, he served because there was another election. Maybe there was a special. There was an election in 1990, special in 1992. Another. He served through 1996. So the last Republican state's attorney was serving through
It was about
1996.
25, 27 years ago, somewhere in that area.
Right. And Dick Devine came in, a Democrat, upset him, and that was the end of. There was no other for any other office Republican Cook County
So the question
candidates.
is, can Fioretti win if he's going to be running as the law and order candidate?
Well, let me just say it's a very steep hill. I will remind people who weren't following this race, Eileen O'Neill Burke raised $3.1 million. And her opponent, Clayton Harris, who had the backing of the powerful Cook County Board president, we thought powerful, Tony Preckwinkle, and that party and that slating raised about $1.3 million. So O'Neill Burke had 3-to-1 advantage financially, and
Let me
a
ask,
lot of that money, excuse
just
me, a
because,
lot of that money came from Republicans, Terry.
well, that, okay,
Okay,
that was part of my question.
that's
How did she raise so much if Tony Preckwinkle, the president of the Cook County Board, is so powerful, and she is? How did Burke defeat Preckwinkle's candidate?
Well, a lot of Republicans decided, Ducey Swap, big name, in Illinois and Republican politics, and gave at least 100K. I haven't looked to see if there was more that he gave. But there are other Republicans there who had decided in their mind Bob had too steep a hill to climb. So this was the election. They certainly didn't want Clayton Harris there. He certainly wasn't the law and order candidate. He certainly was the Soros candidate. Although where was the Soros money? It didn't seem that went to Fox. Didn't seem to show up for Clayton Harris. But the point you're asking is, can Bob Fioretti be a credible candidate? First question is, can he certainly has the ideas, the confidence, the willingness to talk the law and order game. He certainly has the credibility of that. Does he have the money to get out the message and to have an organization that is yet to be seen? We'll have to find out. If not, if he doesn't have that financial backing, it's pretty unlikely that he can win that race.
What about the argument that you have a lot of people across the board, not just the white Chicagoans and Cook County Chicago, but blacks and Hispanics and Asians who are just so fed up with the crime in Chicago, the murders, we see it reported across the nation about all these murders in Chicago, about the crime, the carjacking, the looting of stores. Is there enough frustration among the Chicago populace to say, forget the Democratic Party, we're going to put a Republican in there, someone who is actually going to crack down on crime and incarcerate these people?
Well, when we've looked at the voting so far in the Democratic primary, sadly, there was number one, the turnout was extremely low across the board in Chicago and the other parts of Cook County. I think in the range of 20%. Very, very low turnout historically overall. And and there was a lot of racial voting going on. Blacks voting for black Clayton Harris. And, as you would have thought, these blacks who see they are the primary victims of homicides. When you have 800 homicides, as we've had for several years, 2021 in Chicago, 95% of that is of those victims are minority, black and Hispanic, and about 80% of of the 95% are black. And yet, blacks turned out for Clayton Harris. Hispanics didn't. Hispanics were voting, I think, in larger numbers for Eileen O'Neill Burke. So there was that difference, and whites were voting for her. She was getting big turnouts of whites on the northwest side of Chicago and on the southwest side. But on the near west and south side, those precincts that were largely black were turning out for Clayton Harris, not to the degree they did for Kim Foxx in 2016, 2020. Had he gotten that kind of turnout from blacks, then Clayton Harris would have won. So the question is, do these blacks now who didn't turn out for Eileen O'Neill Burke, and she just barely took her base and took her over the line, do they, in the general election, you're saying they're all of a sudden now going to say, hey, Bob Ferretti's the guy we care about because he is going to stop this crime that is literally killing us, literally killing us.
You were telling me off camera, we had discussions about, isn't there, there is a number of individuals within the black community who have become vocal
Right.
and said, forget the Democratic Party, I'm going to vote Republican for the first time in my life. I think that is happening, right? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've mentioned to you Kata Truss, who's one of the blacks from the South Side, who's becoming a national figure.
Say her name
She's been
again.
on Fox, Kata Truss, okay? And she has been on Fox News Channel, and she has told me she voted for the first time in her life in the Republican primary in this last election. And as she said, it was liberating. It was liberating, Jeff, because she cares about crime, and blacks are not getting the kind of resources they should have in their community from the police for various reasons to help reduce substantially crime in the black community. They're not getting the help they need to getting their kids in the black community to read. They're getting 10, 15% at CPS, Chicago Public Schools, 10%, 10, 15% of blacks reading at grade level or reading at all. And she doesn't want that. She wants the black kids. She's black. She wants black kids to learn how to read. She wants them to be safe. And she, most of all, doesn't want in the city of Chicago the newcomers, as Brandon, as the new mayor of the city of Chicago puts it, Brandon Johnson.
Does she speak for others?
She doesn't want the newcomers, these migrants, to get all these resources that the mayors in the past have said, well, I'm sorry, there's just nothing available to assist minorities. And she just, so.
But now, now the mayor and the governor seem to be finding resources that can be spent on these people who have entered the country illegally are now in Chicago and causing quite a number of problems, both for the taxpayers there as well as the taxpayers around the state.
Well, can Kata and other black leaders join the Republican Party? Can they flip Chicago red? That's doubtful. But as you pointed out, Terry, you just need nationally, state, city margins, significant increases in the number of blacks voting for Republicans. And can you get Hispanics to do so?
I don't want to spend all of our time on the Cook County race. I want to move along. But the thing I would say, unless you have something else, I'm going to move along because we want to talk about the presidential race. But there are similarities to what we've been talking about, what's happening on the ground in Chicago and happening in other places around the state. And when we talk about the race, obviously right now we're talking about President Biden and versus Donald Trump, and look at this difference as we saw this before, but I wanted to bring back up, given what we were just talking about, will Hispanics, will blacks be moving more towards the Republican column? Not certainly not a majority, but to the extent that they move at all, and we see this in some of the polling, that could have a major impact on the race for president, especially as we move to a number of these swing states that are going to be deciding the election. Places like California and Illinois, we know, are going to go Democrat. Places like Florida and Texas are almost surely going to go Republican. But those swing states are really going to matter. And here we see just a recent polling of this month by the Wall Street Journal, and you see that Donald Trump leads in these 6 states, with the exception of Wisconsin, where the two candidates are literally tied. I believe it's at 46% each. So this is going to be, as we expect, a tight race on the popular vote in these states. It could end up with an oversized victory in the Electoral College. But I think, Jeff, what we're talking about here, these issues of crime and the open border, and we talked about as they play out in the Cook County race, they're playing out in other cities across the nation, New York, Atlanta, Phoenix, etc. And I think that's going to have a real impact on the presidential race.
Well, it is up to the Republican Party nationally and statewide, where there are some important elections, obviously, for the Senate and other elections that are important. It is up to the Republican Party. Does it want to govern? Does it want to inspire? Does it want to lead? Will it make it very, very clear to blacks and Hispanics in particular that, especially in the inner cities, which are very important in a number of those swing states, say in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, okay? We don't have to go one by one. We know where the black population is. We know, as I've just said, they care about crime. They care about kids learning how to read. That's education to them. School choice. They want alternatives, and they want it now, because for decades, the Democratic Party has taken blacks in particular, but also Hispanics as well, for granted. So can the Republican Party be credible when it says, look, number one, we all want secure borders, black, white, Hispanic, and we haven't had that. Immigration is the key issue across the board, across the country. Biden has failed. 8 million or so essentially unvetted illegal aliens, illegal immigrants walking across the border unvetted, and from numerous countries, as you've just pointed out in the clip, 40, 50, 60 countries. This is no longer a Mexico issue. This is a worldwide issue of people coming in, and we can't accommodate them. We can't handle them. Number one, immigration. Number two, crime across the country. And they're somewhat related, as we've seen.
Well, they're very much related.
Right. So crime, immigration, the economy, inflation, these are the issues. And we've said education, school choice, show it now. Find a way to get alternatives before the election. Find a way to do it privately, to give some school choice. Don't just give lip service. Do something. Go to your friends. Go to people.
Let me bring us back to crime and this border crossing. I mean, we see. I believe that there's a unusually high number of police officers have been shot around the country just this year. We just had the murder of the police officer up in New York, and from the optics of it, as well as just the decency of it, President Trump flew from Florida to go to the funeral of the slain officer in New York. And Joe Biden, while he was in New York for a fundraising event, didn't bother to go to the funeral, even though he was in New York for that event, didn't even call the family to say how sorry he was for the murder of their husband. That kind of difference in the presidential candidate's behavior, I think, sends a strong message when we're saying that, and the polls are telling us, crime and immigration are really high in the voters' concerns. To have one candidate go to the police officer's funeral and the other, the President of the United States, Joe Biden, not even bothering to call the family, I think sends a very strong message. And in addition to the normal crime, we have to worry, especially when we all remember 9/11. Look at this numbers that we see on those who are crossing the border on the terror watch list, and the massive increase that we see in the number of crossings of those who are on the terror watch list coming in to the country. And we should add that while these people are coming into the country, they are not being followed up on. We don't know what is become of those people, or we don't know where they are. We don't know what they're doing, and it really has been creating a massive security threat, according to many experts, for the nation going forward. Yesterday, we had a number of primaries around the country. There was no surprise about who was going to win. Joe Biden was going to win all the Democratic primaries, and Donald Trump was going to win all the Republican ones. But Donald Trump gave a speech in Wisconsin yesterday on this topic of the dangers of the border. Let's listen to what he had to say.
They're sending prisoners, murderers, drug dealers, mental patients, terrorists. The worst of every country is coming into our country now. They're coming from the Congo, Yemen, Somalia, Syria, all over the world. They're coming. They're country changing, country threatening, and they're country wrecking. They're destroying our country. They're destroying, we can drill and we can get the oil going, but this is a tough one. We're going to end up with the largest deportation in American history. We have no choice. Have no choice.
So deportation will have to be a major part of another Trump policy if he is elected.
Well, Terry, we have this massive problem of 7 to 8 million illegal immigrants who've walked across the border and significantly have been largely unvetted. Now every state is a border state. Now every city is a border city. Now it's Chicago and New York and Denver and across the country. People are saying we're now dealing with these folks who have been in one way or another, not through Texas, but through the federal government and and the Biden administration, infused across the country. And so Trump says, yes, you can't just say, okay, we'll get it right now. We'll have a secure border. You're going to have to do something about checking who these people are and get as many of these folks as you reasonably can deported, especially the most dangerous, especially the folks who you can document are on the terrorist list. Okay. So it gives a lot of work, but you got to keep your eye on the ball first for this election. You got to we're talked about these other issues of crime, of education, of inflation, and especially of illegal immigration. Okay. But you got to do another thing, Terry. Trump has to make sure that you can elect a U.S. Senate. You have to make sure, we've talked before how the advantage is to the Republican Party because they have many opportunities, and very few, if any, Republicans who are up are going to be challenged. But it's not true for the Democrats. There are 6 or 7 states. You better get good candidates in those states. You better make sure they can win, and you better make sure you can execute as a party. You better make sure Donald Trump and the rest of the Republican Party are on the same page. Make sure that you can govern and document and demonstrate that. You can't have the speaker being challenged by Marjorie Taylor Greene, all the time, every day, every issue. You've got to show the American people the Republican Party can be trusted to govern, to handle the issues of Ukraine, of Israel, and so forth.
I think what we're looking at, obviously we have a divided country. The presidential race is very close. It was very close last time. It was very close the election before. We have the Republicans with a extremely narrow, in the House of Representatives, extremely narrow majority. They thought they were going to have a bigger one. We'll have to see what happens this year. And I think not only in the House, we'll have to see if the Republicans hold, and if they do, if they build their majority. But again, we've shown this before. These are the states in blue and red, as well as up yellow up there in Vermont and Maine. These are the states where we're going to have Senate races, and the red states are those states where we think where there are currently the red states are those where Republicans are running for re-election. The blue states are where Democrats are running for re-election. And there are a lot more blue states up this year, which means the Democrats will have a harder time defending that many states, especially in the wake of the issues that we have been talking about: crime, border crossings, and with a very weak candidate, many would say, I would be one of them, and Joe Biden being the head of the Democratic ticket. And that means that what we're seeing is what you and I have talked about. Here's another poll when we talk about the erosion of the Democratic base, and we see here Hispanic votes on Trump versus Biden. They are basically in a dead heat on Hispanic votes, whereas that has been traditionally more Democratic. And we see an erosion within black votes, still overwhelmingly for the Democrats. But if Donald Trump were to get 28% or anywhere near that, there is no way that not only would Joe Biden go down to defeat, but a number of these Democratic senators running for re-election without a massive black vote, they're going to be suffering too, and the Democratic Party would be out of power in Congress.
Well, let's remind people as we go toward the close of the show, let's go back for a second to the race we were talking about, to the state's attorney's race, because I want to see if we can show a clip there of Eileen O'Neill Burke to demonstrate how things have to be made very clear as the Republicans campaign on the national issues. Do you have that clip? Can we show the folks that?
Yeah, and again, I want the people to set up. You were at that debate, which is why it's not just because you're Anchorman Hanson we have you on the air. It's because we want to have you, because you go to these events, and you were asking, what's the difference between how you operate or would operate and Kim Foxx?
What would those crime-fighting policies be that are different from Fox?
We will ask for detention each and every time there's a violent crime. Each and every time there's a violent crime on the CTA, we will ask for detention. Each and every time there's an assault weapon present, we will ask for detention. That will change crime quickly. When there is a perception that you will be punished and there will be consequences for your behavior, that deters crime. That's criminology 101.
Well, there you see it, Terry. It is Eileen O'Neill Burke. When she was talking law and order, she was saying, yeah, she's different from Fox. Detain every violent crime. When there's a violent crime on CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority, detain. When there's a violent crime involving an assault weapon, detain. Detain, detain, detain. We need a similar emphasis from the national Republican candidates. When they have an issue on immigration, let's stay focused on that. Let's not talk about the rapists and the murders. Let's talk about what we know is a fact. If you have people coming across and they're unvetted, we got a terrorist security threat. If we have inflation 7 and 8%, that's a problem for the country. If we have crime going throughout that's a problem. If we have a problem with Russians rolling through Ukraine, that's a problem. If we have the Palestinians slaughtering, or Hamas slaughtering 1,200 people in Israel, that's a problem. Joe Biden, don't get confused. Don't go after when there's a horrific mistake, as there was recently, and a missile hits some innocent people. That happens. It's a terrible fact of war, but who started the war? Hamas. Who can end it now? Hamas. Put down their weapons, and all of the danger to civilians.
And yet, Jeff,
done.
we have Joe Biden pandering to the Arab vote in Michigan. And at the same time, I would say, and a lot of people are saying, he's really turning his back on the union car workers, automobile workers in Michigan, because he's pushing for all these electric cars that come in, and they don't take as many people to make, which means the United Auto Workers is going to be losing jobs. That's another factor we'll have to be watching. And Jeff, before we close out, we often say it too late in the game here. Folks, tell us, what are your issues? Give us a comment on YouTube. Is it crime? Is it the immigration? Is it the economy? Just what is it that you want to know? And tell us if Jeff and I are on the right track in what we're covering, and we can adjust if not.
You give us a written comment. Terry and I will respond to every comment. Just make it. You'll hear our reply.
We'll have to say goodbye. Thanks so much for watching, folks.